Hello, everyone. My name is Jesse. It's been a long time since I put out another video. I've been busy as fuck. I'm not gonna lie, like super busy. Work life, family life, shit like that. I've been just as stressed out as anybody else paying attention to the new administration. The last time I made a video, it was about kind of what I thought the Trump administration was going to do, and how I thought they came into power, what I thought the Democrats did wrong, kind of giving my perspective as somebody who is like a third party person. So I just wanted to kind of do a debrief, issue by issue, on the main things that Trump is doing. This video is going to cover immigration, not necessarily every single aspect of the immigration policy that he's done because it's almost too much to cover in one video. So I'm specifically not going to be talking about the Mahmoud Khalil case or other cases of students being deported because of their protest activities when it came to protesting universities and our government investing in Israel, for example. I think that that deserves a video on its own. So that's why I'm going to be just doing kind of a general immigration video just for this. And then in the future, I'm going to be making videos on other aspects of Trump's immigration policy that I either have an issue with or that I support, and just kind of explain what's going on. So this one basically is going to be about general immigration, like I said. Trump's basic idea, and I think most of you, if unless you're living under a rock or unless you don't pay attention, which I would kind of envy. I wish I didn't pay attention and didn't give a shit. But I think if you're paying attention at all, I think most of you know what Trump's immigration policy is in general. Since 2016, he's been pretty hardline on immigration. In fact, I think he was even more hardline on immigration in 2016. He basically came in saying, hey, these people are taking your jobs. These people are exploiting our labor market. They're taking money from the government. They're pouring in our southern border. Obviously, some of these things are patently false or they're over exaggerated in certain ways. There is a real issue with immigration, though. It's not like a cut and dry, like all immigration's good, all immigration's bad. It's not as simple as, oh yeah, we should let in 10 million people all at the same time, or we should let in nobody. I think that that's been a nuanced and hard conversation for most of this country's history, even like when we had, millions of people coming in, and we were growing as a nation and expanding west, through genocide. But I will say, this has kind of gone and from an idea in 2016 of mass deportation that Trump wanted to do since 2016, and a lot of the people in the MAGA movement wanted to do, to kind of being materialized now, especially because Trump has more control over the Republican Party now than he did in 2016. He has a lot more leeway to kind of do these things that he wanted to do that were somewhat unpopular with some people, even in his own party. Now his party, the Republican Party, has kind of shifted even more to the right on that issue. Even Democrats, some Democrats are for mass deportation. You know what I mean? So, I think to younger people and to a lot of people I know, most of us are kind of weary of that policy, and I think for good reason. I think we know a lot of people who do a lot of good in this country, who contribute a lot of ways in this country, to the good of everybody and to the economy and to people and their communities. And I think that for most of the country, or for a lot of the country, that isn't really the same experience that they have. I think the best way to sum up Trump's immigration policy currently is mass deportation. That's his number one thing. Now, when you ask people, hey, are you for mass deportation for illegal people who are illegally in this country, people who are undocumented, people who are green card holders, people who are permanent legal residents, people who are maybe undocumented but have committed a crime. If you ask all of those things individually, you get very different answers, okay? So for people who have been convicted of a crime or are a confirmed gang member, for example, you'll get a massive amount of people saying, hey, we should get rid of those people. We shouldn't have even let them in the first place. And I think if there's a very clear criminal record where they're like a drug trafficker, then like, yeah, I could even agree with that. You know what I mean? I think most people would. Especially if they've literally been convicted in their country of origin. Um, Now, I will say, throughout American history, it's not as if we were screening everybody before they came in. We let in some pretty shitty people, and we let in a lot of good people. And it was kind of this mass mix of like, we had criminals, drunks, people who were killers, people who were just regular people who just wanted to make a better life for themselves. There were people who were fleeing crimes in other nations over our like 300-year history. So, and to be honest with you, I don't think our country's gotten much worse because of that. I think that the crime rate's pretty similar no matter what time in American history you go into. There's been a lot of surveys done and a lot of studies done saying that actually, people who are undocumented commit less crimes than people who are American citizens and commit crimes at a lower rate. So, you can make a lot of arguments on that, but I think the majority of the country does believe that if you are convicted of a crime in another country, especially your country of origin, or you're undocumented and you commit a violent crime in the United States, then you should be deported, like at the very least, right? Now, Trump said, hey, I'm only going to deport those people. I'm only going to deport people who've been convicted of crimes. I'm only going to deport people who are bad people who aren't like going to contribute to this country. So most people that I talked to, at least, who voted for Trump in that way, didn't think he was going to deport literally any undocumented person he could, or deport people for thought crimes, or deport people for nonviolent offenses. A lot of people kind of projected what they thought they wanted immigration policy to be on what Trump is, because Trump says so many different things in his campaigns. He purposely makes things vague so that people can kind of project whatever they want on him. Okay, and it's kind of a good political tactic until you actually like do the thing that you said you were going to do. Then groups of people are like, oh, I didn't want this. This is too far. Or no, this is too little. And Trump is very good at being vague, even when he's defending himself against those attacks. So he'll just say, oh, well, we're not actually, he'll just blatantly lie, just say, I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? So it's a really, honestly, I admire how easily someone can lie like that and get away with it. It's pretty crazy. I know a lot of lawyers and they're very good at the same thing. Not as good as him, though. It's kind of insane. So Trump came in, he promised to deport illegal immigrants, especially gang members and people who commit crimes. Okay, that was like the main thing. Now, what we've seen on the news, and what I'm sure most of you, maybe you guys know people who are actually, in this situation. People are being deported across the country. People are being detained across the country, regardless of their immigration status, whether they're in the process of getting a green card, whether they're not, whether they've committed a crime, whether they haven't. It's very unclear and it's very disorganized. Trump's main goal, his advisor, Stephen Miller, who is kind of like the hardliner in his administration, who wants basically just brown people to not be allowed in this country in general. It's very racial for him, very racist guy. It's very clear. There's not much ambiguity there. He doesn't make it as ambiguous as Trump does. Like, he's very straight up like, hey, I don't want people changing the culture of this country, whatever that means, okay? To him, that basically just means don't let anyone who doesn't look like me in this country, okay? Even though, like, at least half the country is like that at this point, and it has been for a while. So Stephen Miller, racist, okay? Trump takes his cues from Stephen Miller, okay? He has some moderating, quote unquote, voices in his administration, but there's not that many, okay? Most of them are pretty loyal to Trump at this point. He's gotten rid of a lot of the people who even had some pushback towards him in his first administration and in his campaign. He doesn't have people anymore who really just, kind of just let it happen. They're full-throatedly supporting it. So he basically said, I'm going to deport these people who commit crimes. Now, to him, anybody who comes in here illegally is committing a crime. And anybody who is coming in illegally, he has kind of blanketed as bad people, as people who are criminals. So now you may say, oh, well, there's a difference between someone who's a gang member, who's drug trafficking, doing human trafficking, someone who's genuinely committing a crime. And then there's a difference between that and somebody who's just crossing the border for a better life. Now, they may not be going through like the proper channels. They may not be doing remain in Mexico where they stay there until their paperwork gets cleared. But at the same time, Trump is basically saying these are the same people. Okay, there's no distinction here. Okay, he's making the argument all of these people are criminals. Okay, all millions of people are criminals. Okay, I think most of the people who watch me and know me would disagree with that, and say that there is some ambiguity there. It's not black and white. And it's like everybody's case is complex. Everybody's case is different. Not everybody's criminal. Not everybody's coming here for great reasons. Okay, I think most people can agree on that. Now, he did keep the promise of, hey, I'm going to deport people who are known gang members. I'm going to deport people who are illegal immigrants who have committed a crime, undocumented people who have committed a crime. Now, I will say he did keep that promise, okay? So a lot of people who voted for him should not be shocked that he did that because he said he was going to do it. Now, what he didn't say he was going to do was send people who were suspected gang members, not confirmed gang members, but suspected gang members, to a mega prison in El Salvador, okay? So that was never said on the campaign trail, ever. I didn't hear it, and I was paying attention probably more than most people should in a healthy amount. My consumption of the political race was very unhealthy. So if anybody would have heard him say that, it would have been me. Okay. So next, what I was gonna say is he's not only deporting people, he said he was going to deport people who were criminals. He's imprisoning them in a prison in another country. Okay. Now, the most prime example of this was about a month ago. He started sending suspected gang members, okay, in Venezuelan gangs, Tren de Aragua, and also suspected MS-13 members on a plane, sends them to El Salvador, okay? El Salvador, if you don't know, is known for having mega prisons. They were riddled with gang violence for decades. That was really bad. MS-13 had a grip on most of the country. People said, hey, I want a strong man who's going to fix this, who's going to take care of these gangs. So they elected Bukele, who is now the president of El Salvador. He has taken an iron fist when fighting the gangs, meaning he's basically detaining anybody that they suspect of being a gang member without any due process, meaning they don't get a trial, they don't get to plead their case, they don't get to say anything. Okay, it's straight to jail. Okay, that's very different than how we do things in America generally. Generally, you have to be indicted by a grand jury. You have to have evidence that somebody is this. You have to go among a jury of your peers, and the prosecution has to make their case, and then your defense gets to make their case, and then the jury comes to a conclusion of whether or not you've committed a crime. And then in sentencing, the judge or the jury can determine that sentence. Or you can make a deal with the prosecution and get a lighter sentence, or they find you innocent. Okay, that's generally how most people understand our justice system. Okay, as flawed as it is, because sometimes we don't even live up to that. Now, El Salvador, there's not even the pretense of living up to that. In El Salvador, you are suspected as a gang member. Okay, it could be because of an informant that says, oh, that guy's a gang member. It could be because of the tattoos that you have, okay? In MS-13, there's certain tattoos that the government says signify if they're a gang member, okay? So tens of thousands of people have been rounded up in El Salvador and put in these prisons, and it's not as if they're gonna be let out anytime soon, okay? It doesn't matter what crime they've committed. Just being in the gang itself is basically a life sentence unless they let you out. There's no judge saying, hey, you get this many years if you did this. If you robbed this store, you get this many years. If you committed murder, you get this many years. No, it's just flat out, no matter what you did, if you're suspected as a gang member, jail. Okay? So that is very different than how we do things here. And I think most people in America generally would be against that. Okay? Most people like to have a trial of their peers and like to be able to make their case, and like to have the right to a jury trial so that you're not just thrown in jail when the government feels like it. Okay? Now, you may be wondering, are these suspected gang members, okay, that are undocumented, are they being given due process like in the United States, or are they being thrown into jail like Bukele does in El Salvador? You would be correct to assume we're taking the worst route in that. We are throwing these people into a dungeon, okay, in a foreign country. A lot of these people have never lived in El Salvador. A lot of them are from Venezuela. A lot of them are from Mexico. A lot of them are from other South and Central American countries. So we're throwing these people in a dungeon with no trial. Okay, we're not even proving they're a gang member. We are letting the State Department, okay, and ICE look at these people, make an assessment. Are these people a gang member or not? And guess what? The types of things we're using to determine that. It's the same thing the El Salvadorian government's doing, okay? We're using, hey, do these people have sus tattoos? Do these people have tattoos that could be considered gang tattoos? And if they do, even though they may not have committed a crime in the United States, even though they may not have a criminal record in their country of origin or here, we're going to assume that they are a gang member. Okay? Now, they're saying, oh, well, these tattoos confirm this. Oh, well, we had an informant here who confirmed this. That's not a trial. If you want to make the case that those things confirm someone's a gang member, you can do that in a court of law. And then the judge can then say, hey, I've looked at your evidence, I've considered it, I've heard the defense make their case, and I can say whether or not they're a gang member or not. Okay? People have a Fifth Amendment right, which protects people's right to a grand jury, and that gives people the right to be indicted by their peers for crimes. These people did not get that right. Okay? Now, some people say this doesn't matter because non-citizens shouldn't have the same rights that Americans do when it comes to the Constitution and how we apply it. Now, this has been a thing that's been debated for hundreds of years. Okay, we've litigated this on and on and on. Okay, we did it during the War on Terror. We did it during almost every war we've ever had. Okay, and throughout American history, there's been questions of, have we applied the Constitution to people to be able to have due process or not? And a lot of the times, the precedent has said, no matter what, we still have to have due process for people. We cannot detain people. We can't do corporal punishment on people just because we feel like it. Okay? Now, there is a fundamental question. Some people don't feel like you should be able to have the same rights, even these fundamental human rights, like free speech, religion, things like that, if you're not a citizen. Now, my question to people who do feel that way would be, do you want to be consistent about your morals or not? Do you view people as human or not? When the founding fathers wrote these things, they didn't say, oh, well, just only people we deem are human should be able to have these rights. Other than, the obvious things of, people would say back then, the people who would make the argument that they're making now of, oh, well, only these people should have these rights. Only these people should. These are the same people who were for slavery, who were for the genocide of indigenous people across the Americas. The same people, okay, that are making the argument now are using the same logic that was used to disenfranchise indigenous people and slaves, okay? They did this for years. This was awful. Most people agree on that. But now that immigration has become a hot button issue, you have about 50% of the country that thinks that the Constitution shouldn't apply to humans in general, just people that we deem to be more human. Okay? Just people that we generally consider human and people that we don't consider human shouldn't get these rights. Okay? This was the same logic that was used by the George Bush administration to detain young Muslim men in this country because they suspected them of terrorism. Many of those cases were proven to be bullshit. Many of those cases were proven to be the CIA, the State Department, basically trying to set these young men up, okay, to make it seem like there was more terrorism in this country than there was. And many, many young Muslim men's lives were ruined because of that, okay? Many of these cases were vindicated a decade or two later, but it was too late. Those people were already impacted by what our government had done to them. I fear we're making the same mistake now. We're saying, hey, we don't view these people as human. We don't view them the same as US citizens. We don't think they should be entitled to these things that the founding fathers basically said should be for all humanity. Okay? We should treat humans, okay, with the rule of law. We should not sidestep that just because it's convenient. Okay? Or just because we don't view these people as the same. Now, you may be wondering, didn't they do that for slaves, for indigenous people, blah, blah, blah? Yes. And that was called out over hundreds of years to where we are now, and thousands of cases of litigation has gone on to modify the Constitution. Thousands and thousands of people had to go on the streets to say, hey, the Constitution should be applied to everybody here, not just this one subsection of people you view as human. We called out those contradictions over years and years, and those contradictions still exist, but people are calling them out. And slowly, the more litigation there is, the more court cases there are, judges can basically say, hey, no, the Constitution actually does apply to these people. You still have to do these things. You still have to treat these people the same way. Now, we're at the moment now where a lot of these test cases have happened for different groups of people, like I said, but now it's undocumented people. Now undocumented people are that group where people are saying, hey, we don't get to use the Constitution for these people. They're not the same as us, okay? This is the time now to call out that contradiction, which a lot of people are doing, okay? So, these people being sent to El Salvador, okay, we have no idea, okay, if they're gang members. We have no idea if they've committed crimes. We don't know. The public doesn't know. The Trump administration basically said, we gathered a bunch of intel. We assume these people are gang members. Okay? Whether that was off racial profiling, whether that was because of their tattoos, whether that was because of, people just saying that they're gang members, we don't know. Okay? We don't know because the Trump administration did not allow due process for these people. They didn't allow this evidence to come to light in court. Okay? Now, some of these people, okay, I'm not denying are gang members. I'm not denying that some of these people are gang members or that they've committed crimes. What I am saying is whether they committed a crime or not, whether they're a gang member or not, nobody should be put in a El Salvadorian prison where people are tortured and starved and used as forced labor for an indefinite amount of time without due process, without being able to go to court and to state your case, or without any idea of when you're going to get out, okay? Or without any contact from your family. These people can't even contact the outside world. They're not allowed to, okay? So imagine being an undocumented person in this country and having that fear of the Trump administration could just say, I'm a gang member. They could just make that assertion, throw me on a plane, I'll be in El Salvador. My family won't know where I am. They might see me on a CNN clip of me being bent over with handcuffs on, getting led into a cell with a bunch of suspected gang members. And they would have never known. And I can't contact them. I'm at the mercy of the El Salvadorian government. Okay? Now, the reason that this is a problem, okay, which I feel like we already have highlighted a couple of those reasons, because it's repeating the same behaviors that we have when the United States government infringed on the rights of African Americans, of indigenous people, of many other groups. Okay? We're basically doing that same thing now. But because immigration is such a hot button issue, people are willing to look past that. They're willing to look past the Constitution and the rights of people and what's right, because they think that this solution is needed, because they feel like this is a crisis. Now, we can debate whether or not immigration is a crisis or not, okay? Whether or not there's an invasion at the border. I don't think there is. Okay, I think our immigration system's flawed. We need to make it so that there's more judges who can litigate more cases at the border. We need to make it easier to become a citizen of this country and to actually be able to be a regular citizen. We need to make it so it doesn't take 10, 15 years for people to do it. We need to make it so our border's safer so that people can't just be trafficked over here and used as mules. Okay, because that does happen. People are used as pawns by the cartel and by other governments. Okay, and we use people as well. We use people as political pawns as well, with no regard for their humanity. There are so many parties in this situation that are problematic, okay? And instead of choosing to fix that problem, which don't get me wrong, I'm not gonna let Democrats off the hook either, because they're also in on this, okay? To a lesser degree. We could have made that situation better by making it safer for immigrants to go through that process to become a citizen, to make it quicker, okay, so that they aren't at the mercy of people in Mexico who are paid to bring these people over. Okay, some of these people are paying tens of thousands of dollars to people to bring them over, okay, with no necessarily regard for their safety or anything like that. And sometimes there's catches. A lot of these people are subject to violence. They're subject to detainment. They're subject to sexual violence. They're subject to horrid things. Okay? So imagine this already bad situation being made worse by the quote-unquote free world, by the quote-unquote most free government in the world. Okay, the government that claims to care about its constitution and claims to care about the rights of people around the world. Okay? We should be the ones who are the adults in the room if we actually believe that. But the reality is our government's never been like that. It's never been like that. We've never been this solid good guy in most situations. Okay? It's always been more gray than that. It's never that black and white. Our country is almost as problematic, if not just as problematic, if not more problematic than a lot of other nations. Okay? This should be a shining example of that. The way that we treat the people that people despise the most, okay, and the way that we treat the most downtrodden in our society, okay, that's how we should be judged. Okay? A lot of people don't like undocumented immigrants. Okay, a lot of people don't like these people, regardless of their situation. Okay, if you don't like these people, okay, shouldn't we still treat them with the same due process that we give to regular Americans? If you that badly want to prove that someone's a gang member to validate your point that we should deport them, shouldn't you go through a trial, show the evidence, convince the public of your mission? Convince us. You owe that to the American people as a government. You should have to provide us evidence that these people are as dangerous as you say, and that requires them to be in an El Salvadorian mega prison where they're going to be indefinitely. You should have to prove to us that that is necessary. And I've seen no proof of that. Now, would I be against that kind of detainment for anybody, even like bad people? Yes. I'm not for torturing people in prison. I'm not for violating people's constitutional rights. I think that makes us just as bad as the people our government calls out around the world. It makes us just as bad. Actually, it makes us worse because we claim to be better, but we're not. We are not better. We're just outsourcing our shittiness to El Salvador. Okay? There's a reason that they're sending these people to El Salvador. Okay? It's because they don't want to have to litigate these people here because it's going to make them look bad. It's going to make them look awful. Okay? And I'm going to go through some of these cases of specific people, okay? And if you actually litigated this in court, if you actually showed this in court and actually showed the evidence of, are these people gang members? Did these people commit crimes? People would see how nonsense it is. People would see how problematic this is. Okay, so I'm going to go through a couple people. Now, forgive me for not pronouncing some of these names correctly. I'm not good at that at all, but I will try my best. And if I can't do it, I'm just not going to do it. Not trying to embarrass myself on here. Okay. So we have one person here who came to this country seeking asylum for their family. They were from Venezuela. They were trying to basically flee violence in Venezuela. Okay. This is a gay barber. Okay. This is somebody who has no criminal record. Okay. Here or in El Salvador. Okay. They came in seeking asylum for their with their family. And they were deported because of their tattoos and sent to this El Salvadorian prison. Now, the family literally says these tattoos are normal tattoos and they're being misinterpreted as gang tattoos. And there's no solid witness that can place that person as a gang member even when they were in Venezuela. Okay? So that's just one example. Okay? Now, the next person that I'm going to talk about, Jose Tiapa. He was a Venezuelan immigrant seeking asylum and was detained last month. His wife did not know where he was, but then she saw a video of these men being led into the El Salvadoran prison and recognized her husband. Now imagine how scary that would be. You, knowing your husband's not a gang member, is now being lumped in with gang members in a prison where he will never be able to get out. Okay? Now, he was going about getting asylum the right way. He was applying for the right paperwork. He was trying to make his court hearings like most people do who are undocumented. Okay? He actually had an appointment with immigration court. He had a court hearing scheduled, but he was detained before he could go to that scheduled hearing. So instead of allowing this person to make their case and to say, hey, I'm not any of these things that the government's accusing me of, he was just sent to El Salvador, okay, with no due process. And the craziest part about it, if this guy was a gang member, you'd think he'd have a criminal record back in Venezuela, right? You'd think that would be an obvious thing. There's no criminal record that he has in Venezuela or in the United States, okay? So imagine being this family whose son, husband, uncle, cousin was sent to a mega prison where he's likely being tortured, okay, for charges that were never even proven in court. I think you would all have a horrible time with that. I would be distraught, okay? I can't handle prison. Fuck that, okay? Let alone if I didn't do anything, okay? Other than come in the country illegally, okay? I don't think that should result in you being in a mega prison with gang members for an indefinite amount of time where I will likely be tortured and starved and worked to death, okay? I don't really think that's an equal punishment for that, personally, okay? Another person, Francisco Cacique, entered the U.S. in 2023. He surrendered to ICE immediately, okay, when he got in the country. He was actually set to go before an immigration judge, but was detained even though he had no criminal cases, okay? So this person was trying to go about things the right way. He even surrendered to ICE, okay? Which is scary in itself for most undocumented people, because ICE can just detain you and leave you in detention. So he surrendered to ICE. He was set to go before an immigration judge to make his case, okay? But then he was detained and sent to El Salvador. Same situation. And all these photos that have been coming out from that El Salvadorian prison of detainees being let in, crouched over with handcuffs on, shaved, okay? His family saw photos of that. That's how they found out he was in El Salvador. Same situation as before. No due process, nothing. Now, I think the most egregious example of this, okay, and this actually had an update recently that I'm going to go through, which is a good update. Not all the way good, but somewhat good. So, Abrego Garcia, okay, he had protected legal status, but he was sent to El Salvador on an administrative order. So, not even like these other cases where they were like, oh, well, this guy's a gang member, this guy's a gang member, this guy's a gang member. No. This guy was sent because of a fucking office error, okay? This guy was detained and sent to a mega prison where they torture people because of an administrative order, okay? Imagine your loved one gets sent to prison because of these circumstances. I don't think most of you would be happy about that. I wouldn't be happy about that. Even if my fucking family member was a piece of shit, I wouldn't be happy about that. I don't think I would prefer that person maybe get a trial. Let's see how shitty they are. But fuck me, I guess that's not what we're doing here, okay? So, this person had protected legal status, which is an even step further. He wasn't just undocumented, he was going about it the right way and got far in the process, actually. He was escaping gang violence in 2011 in El Salvador, okay, the very place that he's being sent now to a prison. He was trying to escape gang violence in 2011. That was his asylum claim, okay? The Trump administration accused this guy of being a gang member despite no evidence being published to prove the accusation, okay? So, these are just a few examples of people who shouldn't have been sent there in the first place, okay? Their families are saying they're not gang members. There's no criminal history that would suggest they're gang members. A lot of the government's justification is, oh, well, they have these certain tattoos that look kind of like gang tattoos, but we don't even know if they are. Now, one thing that I love to say, that after I did some of this research, a lot of these tattoos that they're claiming are gang tattoos, especially for these Venezuelan undocumented immigrants, are not gang tattoos at all. In fact, Tren de Aragua, the gang that they're alleging some of these guys are a part of, doesn't have tattoos that signify that they're in the gang. There are no tattoos that can say that you're in Tren de Aragua. MS-13, there are, okay? But for a lot of these guys are Venezuelan undocumented immigrants. And they're alleged to be a part of Tren de Aragua, which has, again, no tattoos that can link you to the gang, okay? So that argument falls on its face, especially for those guys, okay? Now, even if you had a gang tattoo, okay? Even if you had a gang tattoo, that doesn't mean you're still a part of the gang. That doesn't mean that you still are committing crimes. That doesn't mean, unless you have a criminal record, there's no way to verify that, okay? In the world of law, okay, in the United States, for the most part, we deal with evidence. We can't just throw a guy in jail just because he's throwing a red flag or a blue flag. Just because I suspect a guy is maybe a Crip or a Blood. Like, we can't just throw that guy in jail. You have to charge them with a crime. You have to have evidence of that crime, ideally, okay? They have to go through a jury of their peers. We can't just do that, okay? But we're outsourcing that power to a foreign country, okay, to do that. To people who, most of them, have never lived in El Salvador. Now, you could make the argument, hey, if we're just we're deporting undocumented immigrants. We don't want them in the country. We're sending them back to their country of origin. We're not going to send them to a prison. We're just going to send them back to, Venezuela, for example, El Salvador, Brazil, whatever country it is, okay? Now, I think most of the country could, agree with that. I don't, personally, but I think that would poll a lot better than throwing guys who got no due process into a mega prison in El Salvador, okay? Where we have no idea what's happening to these people. We have no idea if they're okay. We have no idea if they're being tortured or not. None. No idea. We have no idea when they're going to get out. None at all. So this is a huge problem, obviously. Now, there are multiple organizations that have sued the Trump administration over this. Okay, some of the families have sued over this, of the people who have been deported, or I should say exiled to a prison, not even deported. They're being sent to a prison, so not the same thing. The ACLU, for example, they sued the Trump, block Trump's ability to use wartime powers to carry out these deportations. Usually, again, what happens is people will be able to make their case in front of a judge. Hey, I want asylum because of, fleeing gang violence, fleeing disease, wanting economic opportunity, whatever, okay? Trump's making the argument, the legal argument, that we're being invaded by illegal immigrants. That's what he's saying. He's saying that undocumented people are staging an invasion in this country. Like it's a coordinated thing, when it's most definitely not. He's saying, because we're being invaded, I get to evoke wartime powers as president. Okay, meaning I can detain people. I have more power than I usually would to do that. I can circumvent this due process because of that, is the argument that he was making. Now, obviously, people interpret the Constitution differently, okay? Most legal experts don't think that's okay. So if you want to have an idea, and even if they did think it was okay when it came to the law, if just because the law allows something doesn't mean a president has done it before in that way, and it doesn't mean that it's the right way to use that power, okay? Just because something's legal doesn't mean it's okay, right? It's legal for insurance companies to deny me care, even if I need that care. Okay? That doesn't mean it's right. That doesn't mean it's okay, right? That doesn't mean it's the moral thing to do, okay? So they're being sued over this power, okay? Now, to be more specific, the Alien Enemies Act, okay, which allows the president to detain or deport non-citizens during wartime. And again, he's claiming we're being invaded, so that's a war to him. That's the argument he's making. We did use this power in the War of 1812, World War I, and World War II. So it's been almost 80 years to 100 years since we've used this power, okay? And during that time, that power, guess what it was used for? To detain Japanese citizens and non-citizens, okay, into internment camps. That's what it was used for. One of the worst things in our history. Okay? Detaining people without due process because of what race they were, because of what country they came from. Okay? That's what this country did not that long ago in the grand scheme of things. And we used that same power to do it. Now, I suspect it's probably going to be the same thing in 40 years. We're probably going to look back on this and view it almost as bad as that. Okay? It's not the same scale, people-wise, but it's the same violations of people's rights. Now, an argument that I would make that most legal experts are making is this power's never been used during peacetime when we're not actually in an active war, okay? And I don't know about you, but we're not sending troops around the world to fight actively in a large-scale war, okay? So even if he wanted to use this power, which he does have the right to do, we're not in wartime. So, how can you make that argument? Now, originally, the judge who, litigated this case blocked any other flights that Trump could do to El Salvador. Okay. Trump ignored that, to be clear. Okay. When the order was done, he was ordered to turn the plane around of these people and didn't. He just let it go. Okay. So basically, you may be wondering why El Salvador? Why are we sending these people there? Okay, I already said they can't contact anybody here. Okay, they don't have the ability to do that. So we have no idea what's going on there. Okay, that's one thing. Because if the conditions got out here and we got to hear these people's experience, it might be a lot worse. Okay, for the Trump administration, PR wise. Now, another reason is because we're paying El Salvador to house these people, to imprison these people. And El Salvador, what they get out of it is they can strengthen relations with us. They can have more protection from us. They can have more economic opportunity from us. And we're paying them again to hold these people. Okay? This also, to Bukele, the leader of El Salvador, this gives him more legitimacy because he has the United States backing his regime at this point. Okay? Now, basically, you may be wondering, why aren't we sending these Venezuelan guys, which is a good amount of these guys, to Venezuela? The reason is because Venezuela won't accept them back. Okay, they don't want to feed into Trump's idea that he can just send whoever he wants to their country and just land a plane, let a bunch of people off that he claims are bad people, right? So Venezuela's kind of resistant to that. Okay, we've had a lot of issues with Venezuela that I'm not going to get into because that would be a video on its own. But their government's handled this differently than El Salvador's has. El Salvador said, oh, just give us anybody, just pay us, and we'll just house them here. So now that that judge denied that flight and stopped any future flights from happening, the Trump administration challenged that ruling. That ruling went to the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court just ruled on this recently. They said, hey, by a 5-4 majority, you can continue these flights. You can continue deporting people. But what you have to do is you have to litigate these things. You have to give these people some due process to state their case in front of a judge, and it has to be done in that jurisdiction where they're arrested, okay, or where they're being held, okay? So this is an improvement, slightly. It's kind of a mixed bag. They're saying, hey, you can invoke these powers to send these people to a foreign prison, but you have to do due process to actually, you have to use due process to actually litigate these cases before you do that. Okay. Now, they didn't say, oh, you can't send them to an El Salvadorian prison that violates human rights. That's like, we're fine with that, right? But you have to at least do due process before you do that. Okay. So due process, great. Now, prison, not good. Okay. Prison that violates human rights, not good. Okay. Also, this doesn't help the guys that are already there. Okay. The Supreme Court, the majority didn't address the people who are already there who didn't get due process, okay? That's what the minority addressed. They said, hey, or is the majority at least going to say, hey, you should bring these people back. They should go through due process before you send them back. No, that was not addressed at all. They said, nope, that's fine. Fuck these like 200 to 400 people who got no trial, nothing, okay? We're ran by unserious people. Okay? So I just want you to know, these Yale and Harvard educated lawyers said, oh no, fuck those people who didn't get due process, but in the future, let's do due process. Okay? It's too late for those people. Fuck them, right? These are the people who run our country. It's pretty dark. Okay? It's pretty rough. Just want you to know. Okay? So, I'm going to end this pretty soon, I promise. I know it's been a long video. There's been some light at the end of the tunnel, okay? More and more people are finding this to be unpopular. More and more people are seeing these stories. Polling for this policy is going down and down and down, okay? Because people see what mass deportation actually means in practice, okay? The bad thing is a lot of these people are already fucked, okay? A lot of these people are screwed already. Okay? It's already been given, Trump has already been given to send non citizens who he suspects of a crime to a prison indefinitely. Okay? This prison in El Salvador, the leader Bukele has said, I'll accept American citizens as prisoners. American citizens who commit crimes. You could send them here. Now, we don't have any confirmation that that would definitely happen. Okay, but if you want American citizens to be sent there, this is the path we're going down. We're opening these routes to detain people and send them to a country where they'll never be heard from again. Okay? Where they'll never be able to talk to their families. We won't know when they can get out. Trump is somewhat greenlighting in the future, if he can, the ability to do that. Okay? He's expressed interest in that policy. Okay? I think it's bad enough what we're doing already, but imagine sending American citizens who they say are entitled to these rights to a foreign prison to be detained indefinitely. Okay? I would hope everyone would have an issue with that. Everybody. Okay? Now, my idea is if someone's rights are being violated, that means your rights can be violated. Okay, this happened during the War on Terror. This happened during the protests of any war. Okay, this happened during the Cold War, during the Red Scare, all of that. Okay, it's happened throughout our country's history. People's rights have been violated, and we've had to fight to make sure the Constitution applies to everybody equally. Okay, this is just an ongoing part of that fight. Most people don't see it yet, but in the history books, that's what this is going to be. Okay? I want to kind of end this with good news, okay, because it's pretty dark. One of the men that I talked about, okay, the New Jersey father who was actually had documentation and was going about this the right way. He had protected legal status, Abrego Garcia, okay? He was sent to El Salvador on an administrative error, okay? His family sued, okay, the Trump administration because they said, hey, if this was an administrative error, you should send him back. You should bring him back to this country. He wasn't supposed to be sent to an El Salvadorian prison to rot forever, okay? The Trump administration tried to fight them in court to say, yeah, we fucked up, but we don't have to bring him back. You know, fuck him, right? That's literally the argument they were making. They were actually using J.D. Vance, the vice president, to spread smears about this person, okay? They used a discredited cop's voice, okay? A cop who was fired, okay, and had a history of lying, who falsely accused this man of being a gang member in the past, and he was cleared for that. They cleared him for being a gang member. He wasn't a gang member, but he had been alleged to be in the past by a problematic cop, okay? J.D. Vance was using this testimony and misrepresenting it to make it seem like this person was a dangerous gang member, okay? They tried to double down on their mistake. That's how much these people don't admit when they're wrong, okay? That's how much politicians don't admit that they're wrong. A good leader will admit when they're wrong. They'll try to make up for their mistake. They'll try to do the right thing when they fuck up, okay? And if they had an ounce of decency, they would have done that. But they didn't. They had to be forced by the Supreme Court, which, unlike the other decision, which was, you know, a mixed bag, I would say, still bad, but had some good parts of it, this decision was good and it was unanimous. The Supreme Court decided, everybody, unanimously, to say, bring this guy back to the United States. He was given no due process. He shouldn't have been sent out or deported in the first place because he had protected legal status, okay, as an American citizen. He committed no crime, okay? You should bring this guy back right now. So now they ordered the Trump administration to facilitate this guy's return. We don't have any updates on if that's going to happen, if the Trump administration is actually going to follow that, if they're going to try to, if they're going to say, oh, well, he's lost, we can't find him. We also don't know if other families are going to start bringing cases as well that can make their way up to the Supreme Court, where we're going to see How many more times is the Trump administration going to get tested? Are they going to want to keep going with this policy, even though the public is falling more and more out of favor with it because of these things? Are they going to double down? Are they just going to keep going? We don't know. Okay. But this one case does show that there are some limits to Trump's power and to the Trump administration's goals. There are depravities that even the Supreme Court, which is awful, will not stoop to. Okay. So, that's the good news. There's going to be more litigation. I'm hoping that I can do an update video on this where, the situation's gotten better. We've brought back some of these people. We've given them at least a trial before deporting them, let alone putting them in a fucking prison for indefinitely. Okay. I'm going to include a link in the bio or a link in the video description of a resource for anybody who's undocumented, who's questioned, who's harassed, anything like that. It's a website. I'm pretty sure it's a legal website where they kind of give you like the rundown of how you should handle those situations, things like that. This is not legal advice. Just want to make that disclaimer. But I saw this website, thought it would be helpful to anybody who runs into this situation. If you can get an attorney, you know what I mean? I know it's expensive. I know for a lot of people that's not like a thing they can do. If you're a U.S. citizen and you can use that privilege to protect people who aren't bad people, who aren't committing crimes, who aren't gang members, if you can do that, if you can use that privilege, if you can, inform people of their legal rights through the Constitution, do that, get involved. And yeah, that's all I can really say at this moment. Hopefully I can make a follow-up video where things get better. I'll definitely make an update video in general. I'm hoping my next video will again be about these students who are on student visas for the most part, who are being deported because of their protest activities and things like that and their social media posts. That's going to be my next video. I want to say thank you guys for tuning in. I know it's been a while. I've been really busy. I'm going to try and be more consistent, even if these videos have to be slightly less. That's kind of my problem is I'm a perfectionist. I have to do a shit ton of research for things like this, which is good, but I could probably tone it back a bit. I know what I'm doing, that kind of thing. I appreciate the support. Let me know if you have any constructive criticism for this video. Let me know if there's any way I could do better. And let me know if there's things that I'm missing that I didn't talk about on top of that. I'm always trying to expand my knowledge on topics and things like that so I can communicate them better to you guys. So I appreciate it. Thank you.